Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the Fearless Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Lynn, and today I'm honored to have Molly Gebrian on. Molly, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
You are the author of Learn Faster, Perform Better, which is a musician's guide to the neuroscience of practicing. This spoke to me because a very good friend of mine, a former piano student, is currently studying brain science at the local university.
Cool.
So she's
Nice.
been telling me all about these things that she's learning about the brain, and she took piano lessons with me, so she's been relating it a lot to how musicians' brains are
Yep.
different. They're bigger. There's special parts that have expanded because of the ways that we've learned, and over because we start so young. So I was super excited to find your book. I've seen it recommended by a number of different people by now. So I finally
Thank
got
you.
my hands on a copy this summer. And I would love for you to introduce yourself first of all to our audience, and then we can jump in as to why you wrote this.
Sure. Sounds good. So, like you said, my name is Molly Gebrian. I am a professional violist, but I also have a background in cognitive neuroscience, and my area of expertise is applying the science of learning and memory to practicing and performing. It's something I've been doing since I was a student, actually, but for many, many years. And yeah, it finally kind of culminated, or for now anyway, in this book of sharing everything that I learned. Because just like your student, actually, when I started studying neuroscience, it started for me as an undergrad. I went to Oberlin College and Conservatory, and I double majored in viola and neuroscience. And I started seeing all these connections, just like your student, between what I was learning in my neuroscience classes and what I was learning from my viola professor about effective practicing. And I just started looking into the research for myself, to practice better. And then it kind of snowballed from there, and now here we are. I've written a book on the science of practicing.
As one does, just like
Yeah,
majored in neuroscience and viola, as if it's not
right.
enough. And then you continued your studies in Boston.
Yeah, that's right. So after I didn't have any plans to go on with neuroscience. It was just I thought brains were fascinating. I still think brains are fascinating. I just wanted to learn about them, but I didn't have any plans to go on. But then I went to New England Conservatory for my master's, and almost immediately after I got to NEC, I realized I really missed the neuroscience, and I was like, "Well,
Mm.
I'm in a conservatory now. What do I do?" So I'm very fortunate that NEC allowed me to do a number of independent studies on aspects of music and the brain that I had gotten interested in. So that's when I started to really dig into the research because I hadn't really had time at Oberlin to kind of do my own thing. So at NEC, I did a lot of sort of just my own, yeah, reading like reams of research papers. I used to go next door to Northeastern's science library and just go through the stacks. But then after that, I went to Rice University for my doctorate
Okay.
in viola. But I was back at a school that had classes other than music, and so Rice actually allowed me to take neuroscience classes with the neuroscience PhD students. Pretty much every semester I was there. In addition to my viola studies, I was taking graduate level neuroscience. And I worked in a lab for a long time. I did a whole bunch of stuff at Rice, like totally unrelated to the viola, but it was amazing. And that's when I really started teaching it to other people. I was the assistant director on two interdisciplinary symposia on music and the brain that was organized by one of the composition professors there, Tony Brandt, who has a real interest in music and the brain. And to get students like involved and excited about this event that we were planning, they asked if I would teach this lunchtime series they called Pizza and Brains. The school supplied free pizza and soda for students so they'd come. And I just like,
What a
they were
winning
like,
combination.
exactly, yeah. And they were like, can you just like teach something about like music and brains to like get people interested in this? And I was like, yeah, sure. It was great. It was so much fun. Like obviously people came because there's free food, but like people came and people were really interested in it. And that was the first time I don't know, I thought it was this thing that this quirky thing that I was interested in, but it made me realize like, wait, other people find this interesting too, and it's really fun to like share this information. So at Rice, I also taught a class on like music cognition and perception, like how the brain processes music, that kind of thing. um and then from there, I got my first collegiate teaching job, and I started writing about it a lot and presenting at conferences. So for the last 10 years, that was sort of my life. I was a viola professor, collegiate viola professor, doing all this stuff with science, the science of learning, kind of on the side,
Okay.
writing, presenting, doing like social media stuff. And then last summer, I moved back to Boston, and I now teach at New England Conservatory. I'm teaching classes on science of practicing, how brains process music, working with students one-on-one, doing workshops. Um, because early on in the pandemic, when everyone was scrambling to be like, how do we teach music online?
Yes.
People started asking me to come in and like do presentations and workshops on Zoom with their students. And because I'd gone to NEC, they knew me and my work. and they invited me in multiple times, and somewhere along the line they were like, it would be great to have you actually like teach here rather than doing this like one-off thing. And I was like, that would be amazing. So now here I am. We just started my second year last week.
Oh,
So
congratulations. And what an amazing story to come back to the conservatory where you couldn't study this
right.
thing that you were so interested in, and now you are the person making it possible.
Totally. Yeah, it feels very full circle to me in an extremely weird way. Like I never ever would have guessed that this is how it would work out, right?
Yeah. And that's just so beautiful as we pursue the things that we're passionate about, what interests us, then doors can open that we could have never
Right.
planned. And we love to see that with musicians as yourself, like showing the example of you can literally create your own career.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to do that, right? Like people sometimes ask me like how did you do this thinking I had a
Right.
plan in mind? I was like, I don't know, I was just interested in this and things just started happening and doors opened like you said, but it wasn't ever the plan, not even in a million years.
I
So,
think that is so powerful and like almost worth hanging out here. Like we say, like follow your passion to the musicians. I mean, for you as a
yeah.
violist, it's you have to put yourself in this position where you're against all the other violists, and you have just carved
Right.
out your brand new path just for yourself. You're excited, you're lit up about it. You have books, conferences, webinars. You're being brought in to do guest speaking, and it's not that you left being a musician. You only added
Right.
to being
Right.
a wholehearted, whole, full musician with extra strengths and skills and a whole other skill set that many people don't have.
Right, exactly. And yeah, I still play viola,
Yeah,
obviously. I
exactly.
still love to play viola. Like, I still perform.
And
Like,
you're
it's not like I'm
teaching.
not a violist and I'm teaching, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, I have always been so adamant that people pursue their passion because if you're doing what you really love in life, like you're gonna succeed because that's what drives you to do things and pursue things that, maybe would be too difficult to stay with, right? Like reading neuroscience papers, that's not like fun necessarily,
It's
right?
not for
They're
everyone.
very they're very dense, but it's fascinating to me. So it is fun, right? And if I was doing something, I don't know, if I was like sitting at a desk all day on a computer, like even if I was earning like millions of dollars, like that sounds so miserable. Why in the world would I do that, right? And so when you're doing something that you really love, it makes it possible for you to do the parts of it that maybe aren't quote unquote fun, but it doesn't matter, right? And then you get where, even if you don't think that's where you're going, you get where you're going.
Yeah, it's incredible because I think many musicians have been told you need to stay in the box. And
Yes,
so you
exactly.
are still performing, you're teaching, you're an active freelance violist, and you have this whole other part of your career that this combination has created this fulfilling path for you. And I think that's so
Right.
important for everyone listening that you don't have to abandon your musical career in order to bring something else in. It can actually be
Yeah.
something that strengthens.
Yeah, totally. I often get asked to talk to like high school groups, like youth orchestras or whatever, and a question I often get asked by the students is like, what advice would you give to someone who has, interest in music and something else? And the thing I always say is like the world is going to try to pigeonhole you. Don't pigeonhole yourself. Like you're going to be told you have to do one thing. You have to choose one thing. Fortunately, nobody ever outright said that to me. Nobody ever came out and said to me, you must either choose between music or neuroscience. But I was certainly made to feel that way. Like that was sort of implied. Definitely never by my family. Definitely never by my primary teachers, actually. So I'm really glad that that was the case. But I was definitely made to feel that, like, I should really choose. And I just don't. I just never cared. Like, it's my life. It's not your life. I know what's right for me. I'm not going to listen to you people.
Woo!
Like, if you don't want to do music and neuroscience, that's fine. That's your life. But it's not mine. And so I'm going to do what I want.
That is so
And
great.
I don't know. That's always kind of been me. I just like, okay, that's fine. Go away.
I
I'm
love
not.
that.
I'm not going to listen to you.
That's so powerful. Can you talk a little bit about energy management then? Because I think that's another thing that musicians would come up against. Because I mean, I've gotten into coaching now, and I feel like, Monday we had this conference, 11 hours on Zoom. Okay, I didn't touch the piano, so I'm learning this
Right.
kind of ebb and flow. Or like today I'm Coach Michelle, and then the next day I'm making sure I'm catching up on practicing. Like, how do you navigate all this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So anybody that knows me knows how important sleep is to me, and I'm always talking about getting enough sleep. So my life, and it always has, my life has always revolved around getting enough sleep and eating regularly because I know that if I don't get, and enough sleep for me is 8 to 9 hours. Anything less than that, I cannot function. So getting enough sleep and eating regularly for me. If I don't do those things, I am a disaster and I can't function. So I schedule my entire life around that every day. And so those are the two most important things to me to make sure happen. Um, Without those, there's no way that I could do sort of my life because I wouldn't have the energy to do it. But then in terms of like the ebb and flow of like practicing, let's say, and managing that, I used to practice 4 hours a day, kind of without fail. I haven't done that in years because I don't have time for that. But one thing I talk about a lot in my book actually is the research is really clear that we make the most progress during breaks, which is the most counterintuitive thing ever. But that research has really helped me when I can't practice. Like yesterday, I practiced for an hour. Probably today, I'm not going to practice at all, actually. But that research has helped me see actually the breaks aren't wasted time. The breaks are what my brain needs to physically change itself, and then I'll come back and it will be stronger. And so I think if I had known maybe 10 years ago that like yesterday I practiced for an hour and today I'm probably not going to practice, that would have like freaked me out.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh, no, no, no. But now it's like, that's not a big deal. Like it doesn't matter. Like I get good work done when I'm practicing, and when I'm not practicing, like my brain is still processing the stuff that I worked on. And that's important too.
Okay, this is incredible. We need to dig into this, and this is a great way to jump into the book too, because that really spoke to me. And you explain breaks in a couple different ways. You talk about the micro break, and then you also talk about learning
Yeah.
a piece over 3 weeks, for example, not touching it for a week, and then somehow you come back, it's better.
Yeah.
This is giving me like I feel like a sigh of relief coming over me. Can you explain to our audience like those two different styles of breaks?
Yeah, totally. So, the research on breaks looks at breaks of all sizes and lengths. So micro breaks are like little short breaks, like 10, 15 seconds, a couple minutes breaks, and then up to like a day or a week or months, taking time off. And basically, this is so hard to wrap your mind around because while we're practicing, that's when you feel like you're making the progress, right? Because you're practicing. But in order to get better at anything, in order to learn anything, our brains have to actually make physical changes to themselves to support that higher level of skill or learning or whatever, which I think makes sense if you think about it, right? Like your brain has to change in order to learn. But the brain can only make those physical changes really when you're taking a break. So an analogy I've been using more frequently, actually, that's not in the book, that seems to really resonate with people, is that of strength training. Because I think most people have experience doing some sort of physical activity and getting stronger. And I think most people know that you don't actually build strength during the workout itself. You create micro tears in your muscles, right? And then your body repairs those micro tears stronger while you're resting. And I think everybody knows the importance of rest days. Like you can't do leg day 2 days in a row, or certainly like every day out of a week. Like your legs are going to be ripped to shreds and you won't be able to walk, right? You need to have a break so your body can repair itself essentially, and then it repairs it stronger. Our brains are exactly the same. You're not creating micro tears in your brain, but you are giving your brain input that your brain then does something with, just like your muscles when you're taking a break. So within a practice session, micro breaks, those little short 10, 15-second breaks, are really important to give your brain a chance to process what you just did. There's a really cool study that I talk about in my book where they had people learning. It was just a button press sequence on a computer keyboard. They'd practice for 10 seconds and then take a 10-second micro break and then practice for 10 seconds and so on. And they found that the vast majority of the improvement happened during the breaks, not during the actual little practice sessions. But also they had people's brains hooked up to a brain scanner to see what was happening while they were practicing or taking a break. And they found that in those 10-second micro breaks, the brain was replaying what they had just practiced 20 times faster. So it was like a super fast forward replay. Like so cool,
So
right?
cool.
Like you feel like so cool. Like you feel like when
Thank
you're
you,
taking a
brain.
break, it's like you're not doing anything, but like, yeah, the brain is doing so much. And so that paper came out in 2021. And before that, I wasn't taking micro breaks because I didn't know about it, right? But since then, I've been taking micro breaks, and it's wild how well they work. Like 10 seconds of just standing there and like getting a sip of water and like spacing out. And like, I always practice in front of a window. So I like spy on my neighbors and look at the dogs walking around or whatever, and like, you'd think that that would be like such a waste of time, but oh my gosh, it makes such a difference with how quickly I can learn things, how well I retain things. Like I mean, it shouldn't be amazing because I know the research, but it feels amazing. It feels like this magic bullet in a way that
Wow.
you just stand there and you space out. And then longer breaks, like, or I talk a little bit about this in the book, but early on in the pandemic, like April 2020, I was always scared to try this big breaks thing, like days or weeks off, because like, I don't know, like you feel like that's not going to work, right? If I take a day off, I'm going to like lose how to play. But early on in the pandemic, there were no concerts, right? Everything was canceled. And I was like, okay, this is the perfect opportunity actually to try this long breaks thing out. Because if it backfires and it doesn't work, it doesn't matter because I don't have any concerts anyway, right? And I can just see what happens. Um, so I did this huge experiment on myself with, different length breaks. I am never ever going back to how I used to practice, which was trying to practice everything every day, trying to practice every day. I haven't practiced on Sundays since, April 2020. I take every single Sunday
Wow.
off, and I have for the last 5 years. But yeah, now I have this sort of schedule of taking days and weeks off, and the breaks get longer and longer the better you get at something. That's what the research shows. And I learn music so much faster than I used to. It feels so much more secure than it used to, and it's just, yeah, it's kind of wild how well breaks work, and we just don't
Yeah,
know
exactly.
this, right? Like it's not part of our training, and we're led to believe that taking breaks is bad and you're lazy and you shouldn't take time off, and like it's so much the opposite of what the research
Yeah,
shows,
thank you for explaining all this. And I was also very surprised when I read about the micro breaks. So just to
right?
clarify, like you're allowed to just sit there and do nothing for 10 to 15 seconds.
Not only are you allowed to sit there and do nothing,
That's
you
what you do.
should sit there, and
Okay.
that's what you do. Like the brain needs to space out, which is another weird thing because we're led to believe like like, oh, like stop daydreaming, or you need to focus, or like all those messages. But the brain actually needs to space out and rest, and it does a lot of stuff. But you have to let it. You have to let it, right? And so yeah, during my 10 to 15 second micro breaks, I usually get a sip of water, and I just like look out the window and watch the dogs walking by, look at the pretty leaves changing color, like whatever's happening out there, and then I go back and I do another, if I'm trying to get like a certain number of correct repetitions to solidify something, I'll do another repetition or two, or whatever. But yeah, I just kind of space
So
out,
I'm assuming
don't
that
do
we're
anything, and
not
then
looking at
come
our
back.
phone during that 10-second break.
Don't look at your phone. Exactly. Yeah, that's something I need to add. That if I do a second edition of my book, everybody's always asking, is it okay to go on social media?
Or
No,
even
don't
just
go on
check
your
your
phone.
WhatsApp
Don't
and
go on
then
social
see like
media.
20 people need you at the same time. And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
No, no, no.
Okay,
Don't do
just for
that.
everyone who
Yeah.
hasn't got the book yet, can you explain when the micro break happens? After how many repetitions?
Yeah. So actually, I've changed things from how I
Okay.
describe it in my book because I'm always experimenting on myself. So, um, what I describe in the book was like if you're, I think all of us have the experience of doing repetitions to solidify something, right? To make sure
Yeah,
you
doing
can
it
you can do something
perfectly
right.
over and over was how I learned. Like 10 times
Right.
perfectly, and you got to start
Right.
over if you mess up.
If you start off or you mess up. Yeah, exactly. And I used to do that just like one after another, right? So I started experimenting after that micro breaks with, okay, what if I only did three instead of like a whole bunch? Three and then a micro break and then three more because it's symmetrical and it's easy to keep track of. And so that's what I was doing when I wrote the book. And that works really well, like doing two or three. More recently, actually, I've been experimenting with doing one repetition and then taking a micro break and then the next repetition and micro break. And that seems to work better.
Whoa.
Um,
Just playing it perfectly once and
yeah,
then
isn't
just
that?
waiting.
And then
Okay.
just waiting, and then do the next repetition, and then just wait. And I always have a timer on when I'm practicing to sort of keep track of time. And if I were to add up all of the micro breaks, I practice in 30-minute segments a time. If I were to add all of them up, they would add up to like 10 to 15 minutes of my 30-minute practice time. So like a very large chunk of my practicing doesn't have sound in it because I'm
You're
just
thinking, you're
standing there
processing. It's
allowing my
brilliant.
you're processing. Yeah, exactly. And like, it's amazing how much more I get done and how quickly things stick with me. I think we've all had the experience of like, you're just like pounding something over and over and over, and it's not getting better, and it doesn't seem to stick, and you feel like you got it, and then you come back the next day, and like all your work is gone, and you're like, oh, what the heck? Like, I figured this out yesterday. Why can't I do this anymore? But when that experience, especially of coming back the next day and be like, oh my gosh, I have to do all my work over again, that is an indication you didn't practice well the day before, even if it feels
Oh,
like you did,
wow. Okay.
because your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is like, I think all of us just think that like the
Wait,
process
wait,
is
take the
like
knife back
10
here.
steps. Exactly, like 10 steps forward, 9 steps back. I think that's what we think the process is, right? And that we're always just having to go back and do our work over again. And that's not how it should go. You should come back the next day and your work should either be where you left it or better
Because you
than where
slept.
you left it. Because you slept, because you took micro breaks, because you interleaved your practice, which is something we haven't talked about yet. But like, it sometimes to me, practicing in this way now, after having not practiced that way so many years, like growing up, right? It still sometimes feels too good to be true. Like, are you telling me that I practiced way more than I had to, you know, growing up when I was in school, and I wasn't really accomplishing anything? Like, that's not a good thing. But it is nice that, like, because I don't have a lot of practice time now. Like, I'm lucky if I get in 2 hours a day. Like that these days, that's like a really good practice day for me is 2.5. But like I'm happy with two. Most days I get 1.5 if I'm lucky. But I learn music faster than I used to when I was practicing 4 hours a day.
Incredible. And I also love how much emphasis you put on your sleep, because you're saying some days an hour and a
Yep.
half is all you practice. Well, if you slept an hour less, you could practice an hour more, which is how most musicians probably think. Yeah.
Think about it. Yeah, but like sleep, I mean sleep is the ultimate break. Your brain is doing so much stuff when you're sleeping to process what you did during the day. Not to mention that it's just really hard to focus
Yes.
when you're really tired, right? And so you're not going to be practicing well like to begin with. Um but yeah, I mean sleep is really really powerful for learning, and there's tons and tons of studies where they'll have people learn something on day 1 and then go home, go to sleep, get a full night's sleep, come back on day 2, and they are way better on day 2. There's this huge jump in their performance, and it's attributable to the sleep, not anything they did during practicing. So yeah, sleep
Okay. Well,
is
I'm a
really
napper, so
critically
I'm going to
important.
do guilt-free naps from now on.
Yes. Naps, there's also really cool research on naps, that naps are so beneficial. I mean, one of the best things you can do is practice
Yes.
and then go take a nap. Like that's like one of the very best things you can do for learning. So yes, do not feel guilty about your naps. That's
I should have
exactly
called
what you
you
should
way
be
sooner.
doing.
This is great. Okay, I know it's in the book, but can you talk about that 3-week practice strategy that you have for learning a new piece and how you have evolved your practice strategy?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more like
Oh,
four
okay,
and a
sorry. Yeah.
half weeks is what it turns out to be than three, but whatever. So yeah, this comes from my experiment on myself early in 2020 with taking breaks. So, I experimented with lots of different schedules of taking increasingly long breaks from what I was working on. What I do these days is, on the first day of practicing something, and by something I mean like a single phrase. Like I'm not taking 3 weeks off from practicing or whatever. Like I'll work on, like, let's say a phrase of a new piece, and I'll work on that phrase usually 3 days in a row on average. If it's really easy, maybe only two, but 3 days in a row. And then I'll take a day off from that phrase, and I won't even think about it, won't do anything with it. And then, so let's say I practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, take Thursday off, then come back on Friday, and I'll do every other day, usually 3 times on average. So actually, not Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, because I don't practice on Sundays. So Friday, Monday, Wednesday is what I would do. And then after that, sort of every other day, 3 times on average, I'll take a week off from that passage. Don't think about it. Don't, it's, yeah, out of my awareness. And then I come back after a week. And then usually what happens in the book, I talk about doing it 3 days in a row again. I rarely need those 3 days. Sometimes I come back after a week and it feels fantastic. I'm like, great, goodbye. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Sometimes on the first day, a few things are a little bit like I have to remind myself about them. So I'll practice it that day and then the next day, and then I'll take 2 weeks off. It's rare that I need like 3 days in a row. And then I come back after 2 weeks, and almost always after 2 weeks, it's like, this feels great. Ready to go. And so and I always have like many passages making their way through this sort of schedule of breaks. I use my Google Calendar to keep track of it all. And it's also great because I can just open my Google Calendar every day and look at what's on the docket for today, and it tells me what to practice, and I kind of don't have to
Wow.
decide, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, and then once things make their way through the schedule, they feel very solid, like surprisingly so, given how little I've actually practiced them. And they're ready for me to just get ready to perform them. So like integrate with larger sections, to work on stamina with larger sections, to practice like performance readiness, to test can I play it just on the first try, and the way I would want to in a concert. But it's so different than how I used to practice, and it works
So if
so
you're
much
learning a
better.
brand new sonata, you're mentioning working one phrase at a
Mm-hmm.
time. Like, how do you divide the rep?
Mm-hmm. How do I divide the rep up? Yeah, so one of the first things I do after I've gone through and I put in my fingerings and my bowings, because that's the first step, like how physically am I going to play this thing? Then I divide the piece into red, yellow, and green sections. So red sections, and a section could be a measure in this case, but red sections are emergencies, like things that are really hard, either that I know, like looking at it, it's really fast and it's really high and it has a lot of double stops. Like automatically, that's going to be red. Or things that when I was putting my fingerings in, I'm like, oh my god, that is so awkward. Like, or that's really hard to hear. Anything that like if I tried to play it right now would be embarrassing for me to play in front of somebody. Those are my red sections. Yellow sections are things that need work, but they're not emergencies. And usually it's pretty clear the difference between those. And then green sections are things that are fine. Like, sure, I'm going to practice them, but if I had to play it right now, I wouldn't embarrass myself. It would be
Sight readable
like
or something.
acceptable playing. Sight readable or like, yeah, exactly. And then I get to work on my red section. So I rarely just start at the beginning and learn in order. I start with my red sections because that's what's going to need the most time, right? And then I usually choose the reddest of the red, like what is the hardest section in this whole thing, and I start with that, and I just start by breaking it down and figuring out like, okay, what are the problems in here? What are the things I'm going to struggle with? How can I break this down into manageable chunks? And then yeah, I start with that passage, and it works its way through the schedule of breaks. Usually, when I start a new piece on any given day, I will have on the first day, I would say I usually have 3 to 5 sections that start their way through the schedule, sort of depending on how much time I have and stuff like that. And then as I have time working through the schedule, I just sort of add new sections.
And how long would you spend per red section?
Totally depends on the red section. So some red sections need a lot of time because there's a lot of stuff in there that needs to be sort of broken down and worked out. Other red sections, like I learned 2 new sonatas over the summer, so I'm thinking like of this one movement in particular. The reddest of the red sections, it was actually just one little transition from one note that was very high to a double stop that was very awkward. Everything else actually wasn't that bad once I started digging into it, but it was that part that needed attention. So it didn't actually need that much time because it was just like essentially 2 notes. Whereas there's another in a different sonata, there's another red section that's not as hard as that really high awkward thing, but it's longer. It's sort of a long double stoppy section that's like a big sequence that was just kind of hard to get really well in tune, and it's fast, so I had to work it up to tempo. So that actually required more time over the weeks that I was learning it. Even though it's not quite as hard technically as that other thing. So yeah, it's hard to say how long.
I love this. So just one more time, 3 days in a row, and then every other day, except Sundays, for the first week.
Yeah, except Sundays. Yeah, 3 days in a row, take a day off. Yeah, and then every other day 3 times. Then take a week off 3 times. Take 2 weeks off 3 times. The 3 though is an average. Sometimes it's only 2 days on all these like 3 steps. Sometimes it's 3 days. Sometimes it's 4 days. Sometimes it's
after the
1
week
day.
off. You're talking.
It's really easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes even like there have been passages where I've done it 3 days in a row. I take a day off, and then so like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, take Thursday off, play it on Friday, and I'm like, this feels totally fine. Like if I had to play this for someone right now, that would be absolutely no problem. I do not need to practice this again. See you in a week. And I just put on.
I would love to see your Google Calendar. Oh my gosh, I'm just thinking of the rep that I got to learn. I mean, for pianists too, we have a lot of notes. So I'm thinking now I need to go through all my scores: red, yellow, green. I love that. I mean, I definitely have the red sections.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think we all know our red sections, right? I think we sort of know that intuitively that like, ugh, these are the really, really hard parts. But the thing with doing the red, yellow, green, and sometimes people ask like, well, what if you're wrong? Like, what if you call something red and it's actually yellow? Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's just a way to get started. It's just a way to cut down on the overwhelm. And like, once you can see really clearly, like, and sometimes movements that seem really difficult, you do the red, yellow, green, and you're like, oh, actually, there's only 5 red sections. Most of this is yellow. Like, and that, yeah, yes, it needs practice, but it helps you realize, like, okay, there's really only a small handful of things. They're like really tricky. And the rest of it, like, is needs practice, but is manageable. And it just, yeah, it just helps cut down on the overwhelm. And I feel like it's
Yes.
like a bird's eye view of the piece that's really hard to get, I think, when you're just looking at the piece as a whole with nothing
Yeah.
sort of marked out like
And
that,
that overview
at least
work at
to
the
me.
beginning that you're describing is like so. I mean, I've started to look at two
Right.
pages at once and kind of listening to the recording and seeing sections and just kind of getting the overall view
Right.
first, where my pianist tendency was always to jump in and go for the notes without seeing the big picture
Right.
first.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's so relatable that you just jump in and you start learning. But if you don't have a big picture view of the piece of like, how is this put together structurally
Yeah.
or what's going on musically in this piece, you can't even, at least for a string player, like you can't even decide on fingerings sometimes because what you're trying to say musically is sometimes dictated by, or the fingering sometimes dictates the musicality and vice versa, like what string you're going to play it on. It sounds really different. And so you need to know, at least on a preliminary level, like, okay, this part is like the climax and it needs to be really brash and like in your face. That's going to be a really different fingering and potentially bowing than if it wasn't that
Mm-hmm.
sort of character. So you don't have to necessarily know it super, 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 super in depth before you start, because obviously you're gonna get to know the piece better as you work on it. But having an overview before you start, I think, helps you start, so you know what you're doing and what the context
Yeah,
is of
so good,
everything that you're
so
playing.
good, and you can sleep better at night because you know what the spots in your head are that you have to
Exactly.
work on.
Exactly. That's the other thing. Like, I think a lot of people start from the beginning and they just start learning notes. And you kind of have in the back of your mind, I think, like, oh no, what if there's really hard stuff? Or like, am I spending too much time on the beginning or whatever? Or you don't think about that. And then you get to the last page and you're like, oh crap, like this part is so hard. I should have started this weeks ago. Whereas if you give yourself this overview and you see, okay, the hardest thing of all is like the last two lines, which is not uncommon, right? Because it's really fast and it's this big flourish at the end. Like, start with that and then you can rest easy knowing, okay, that I'm looking at that, that's under control, it's sort of in my practice system, whatever that may be. And it's not sort of looming over your head,
I love this
you're
so much.
dealing with
This is
it.
so great. Can you talk about the interweaving that you mentioned before?
Yeah, so um we think we should practice in sort of breaks aside, like big blocks of time. Like, okay, I am working on my concerto and I'm going to work on it for half an hour or like whatever. Um, and then once I'm done with that, now I'm going to go work on my sonata or whatever. And we think, okay, we put these big blocks of time, and it seems to make sense. But what the research is really clear on is that things stick with us better. We make more progress when you're constantly switching between things. So you do a little bit of your concerto, then a little bit of your sonata, then a little bit of, whatever. Because there's a variety of reasons why this works. But one thing I often talk about is as musicians, we need to have a lot of cognitive flexibility, right? Because when you're performing, the music just keeps going, and you have to constantly change your frame of mind and being like, how do I play this section? Oh, right now, here I am in this section. And it just takes a lot of flexibility. And so when you practice in this interleaved way that you're constantly switching between things, you have to practice that skill of flexibility, of switching gears and just, doing something else. People often say to me, it's really hard for me to switch to get my mind in this
Yes.
new thing. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Because you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to switch your frame of mind on a dime when you're performing. Or think about an audition, right? When they're asking for different things and you just have to go and you have to switch gears. So it practices the skill of flexibility. When you're constantly switching between things, you also come back to things. And that is one of the most important parts, that you work on something for a while, work on other stuff, and then come back to that first thing. You give your brain a reminder about that first thing, and it helps cement it in your memory. One of the examples, or one of the analogies I give for this that I think people resonate with, is if you took a class and on the first day of class the professor talked about something a whole bunch and then never ever mentioned that again, and suddenly it was on the exam, you'd be like, what the heck is this? Like, you'd be like, I guess we talked about that, but like, I don't remember, right? But if the professor talked about that topic a little bit every single class and kept returning to it, by the time you got to the exam, you wouldn't have to study that thing. You'd be like, yeah, we're talking about this all the time. Like, I know this, right? And so with practicing, if we do one big block on something and don't return to it that practice day, our brain has a much harder time holding on to it than if we practice it for a little bit, do some other stuff, come back and practice it again, remind our brain, do some other stuff, come back and practice it again. Um, That's not doing enough interleaving, going away and coming back, is one of the things that's behind that experience of coming back to your piece the next day and feeling like you've lost all your work because you didn't give your brain those reminders
So in a typical day, how would you
the
set
day.
up those blocks of time to come back to something?
Yeah, right. So there's sort of an infinite number of ways to do this. Some people prefer to schedule it out, that like every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, or I like to use a 3 minute timer, every 3 minutes, you're switching what you're doing and you write down sort of the order of switching before you start practicing, so you know exactly what you're doing. And I do that sometimes. I like a 3 minute timer. Actually, I'll pick three little things that need practicing. I'll come up with an order of switching, usually a random order. So like 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2. Let's say I put on my timer to go off every 3 minutes, and every 3 minutes I just switch, to whatever is next in the list. More common for me though is I know what I'm practicing for the day because my Google Calendar tells me. I know how much time I have. I practice in 30-minute segments, like I said. And so in any 30-minute segment, going into that, I know, okay, I have these 5 sections, let's say, that I want to practice that need attention. I know what my goal is for each of those sections, what I'm hoping to get done, and I know how I'm going to approach trying to achieve those goals. And usually I will interleave and switch between them in a more intuitive way. I'll usually start with the thing that needs the most attention, whatever that is, and I will practice it for, it's hard to say. Sometimes I'll practice it for 2 minutes, sometimes I'll practice it for 10, 12 minutes, but these days I never practice any one thing for more than about 10 minutes. And then I will take a break from that and go practice something else. And maybe that something else only needs like 2, 3 minutes because it's a tiny little thing. And then maybe I'll return to the first thing. Maybe I'll go to thing number 3 and work on that for a while. But I kind of have these 5 things kind of like floating around, and I'm returning to them regularly within the practice. But how exactly I do it is sort of more intuitive based on, what I feel my brain needs. That's so vague. But these days I can feel like, okay, I've been working for about 10 minutes on this really intensive section for intonation and like really listening to the pitch really, really carefully. And I can feel, okay, my brain needs to do something different. So now I'm going to go work on something where the rhythm is really tricky, let's say, and like making sure I can feel the rhythm. But the more you interleave your practice and the more breaks you take, you start to feel actually that your brain
Most
needs
people
a break
grab their phone at that
from
moment,
something. Most people grab their phone. Actually, that's a really good thing to point out because I think people say, well, what does it feel like? But you're right. People know because they grab their phone because they start spacing out. So when you feel that urge to grab your phone, take a break instead.
The micro break.
Stare at the
Go
dogs
spy on the neighbors.
the micro break. Yeah, go look out the window. Yeah, exactly. Or, sometimes I'll go in the kitchen and get a snack. Sometimes I will take a break and do some random chore. Actually, something that's really great is laundry. So I'll put my laundry in, practice for the length of the laundry, then go put the
You've got
laundry in
your
the dryer.
whole life
then
sorted.
Practice. Then
That's
get the laundry out.
amazing.
I do. Like you hit some. It's actually chores are a really good thing to do. During a break or practice around the chores because then you get your chores done. But it's
that's
also
phenomenal.
helping you manage your breaks.
Okay, wow. I've got so much to process here with everything you're saying. I wanted to go back to when you were talking about interweaving. Interleaving.
Interleaving. It's with an L. Interleaving. Yeah, interweaving
I
though.
thought we were
It is
weaving.
the
We're
same
leaving.
thing.
Okay,
We're
got it. Thank you for
interweaving
clarifying.
everything. Yeah,
Do you not,
interleaving. Yeah.
Is there any pushback around like you need to spend a certain amount of time before switching or else it won't stick? Or you have to just give it enough? Yeah. How do we manage that?
No, I mean there is
please tell me,
pushback, but
yes.
that's not the research doesn't show that. Yeah, and it's kind of amazing. Like in the research, they often force people to switch after a certain amount of time. Like time goes off and then they have to switch. And what I found in my own practicing, like especially with that 3 minute timer thing, like the 3 minute timer
Yeah.
goes off. Maybe I'm not done with what I was working on, but I have to switch. And it doesn't matter. It's kind of amazing. Like you're in the middle of working something out and the timer says you have to go do something else. Okay, so you go do something else. You come back to that thing and you're like, what was I in the middle of? Oh, right. Okay. And you pick up where you left off. And that sort of, oh, right, reminder is
Interesting.
what helps it stick for you, which
get
is
that, yeah.
really counterintuitive. and students are always really skeptical, and a lot of times I will actually do this with students in a lesson or in my practicing class that I teach at NEC. We have a number of our classes on Zoom with everyone in their own practice room, so I can sort of guide people through a practice session. And we always have a class with this interleave practice thing with the timer, and everyone is always astounded. Like, I thought that that was going to feel really chaotic. I felt like nothing was going to stick with me, but actually it was the complete opposite of that. And students always say, especially in my NEC class, because it takes a 3-minute timer 3 times, takes 27 minutes. Students are always like, that was the most productive 27 minutes I think I've ever had. I got more done in those 27 minutes than like my entire 4 hours of practicing yesterday. It's really, it feels so weird. It feels like this can't possibly be, but then you do it and you're like,
three
okay,
pieces, let's say 3 times 3.
Yeah, I'm not 3 pieces. 3, I mean, you can't get much done in 3
yes.
minutes, so you have to be
Excerpts
really
or choices
targeted.
of,
So yeah, like, so what I might do in a 3-minute segment is like work on one shift.
So 3
right?
targeted
or
things.
something like really small like that.
Okay. Got
3
it.
targeted things.
There's no
exactly.
break for that 27 minutes, except the micro breaks maybe.
Yeah, the micro. So it's important to still take the micro breaks within those 3 minutes. You can also, I mean, it's not a problem at all to between each 3-minute segment to put in a little break of 15 seconds, 30 seconds. What I use for this is an interval timer. So there's all these timer apps you can get. It's for high intensity interval training, like exercise. And you can program the timer to do whatever you want. So I usually just put in a 3-minute timer that just keeps going. But you could program in 3 minutes of work, 30-second break. Let's say 3 minutes of work, 30-second break. Because
I'm definitely trying this today. If it's like a 27-minute exercise, as it sounds,
try it. It's amazing. I mean, and that's what I say to people. Like, I feel like people have 2 reactions to this. Either, ooh, that sounds kind of fun, I want to see what that's like. Or people are like, no, that sounds terrible, I don't want to do that. And to the people who are like, no, I don't want to do that, I'm like, it's 27 minutes out of your life. Like, it's an experiment. Give it a try. Test it. See how you feel. And yeah, people are always surprised at, like, because I mean, 3 minutes, you have to be really focused in 3 minutes. You can't waste time. You can't space out. You have to really know what you're trying to do. And yeah, people are always surprised.
Okay, so we're going to pick
how well it
3
works.
targets.
So
we're going to return to those 3 things 3 times.
Targeted things.
So we're practicing the return.
Yep.
We're practicing the micro breaks. And
right.
we're practicing keeping our focus for that long and not turning to a distraction when you feel your brain starting to space out.
Right.
And at the end we'll be machines who also have our laundry done.
Exactly. Have your laundry
I love
done.
it. I feel like a new person already. Okay, what's something that really surprised you writing this book?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the thing that surprised me the most is the timeline of publishing. How weird. I wrote the book in 2021. It came out last summer in 2024. That's what surprised me the most, actually, is how much time I'm just sitting around and wondering, like, what's happening. Like a big break. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there was like between a certain step of the process, there was almost a year where I was just sitting around like, okay, what's happening? But yeah, I mean, all of the information in the book is stuff that I knew before I wrote the book and had been presenting on for many years. So it's not like there was information that was new to me, like through writing the book.
And it came out a year ago?
It came out, July 30th, 2024. So a little over a year ago.
And what kind of response have you been getting?
Yeah, the response has been incredible, actually. Like, so many people have read my book, which is just so nice that, like, I wrote something that's helping people. But I get emails, since it came out, I get emails pretty much every day, it feels like, from random people all over the world who have discovered my book, from, like, professionals or students in conservatory or whatever, to amateurs who just started learning the guitar, like, yesterday or something. And the whole gamut, like people who played an instrument growing up and stopped playing and now they're retired and they're coming back to it, or people who have always wanted to play an instrument and they've been learning for a couple of years in their retirement. Like, all ages, all instruments, all levels, people emailing me either to ask me questions like, you said this in your book, I'm not sure how this applies to my specific, whatever, or people just thanking me, which is so nice to hear that it's really helping people, because that's why I wrote it. And yeah, I mean, the response has been amazing. I'm just so grateful that I was able to create something that helps people.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, I told immediately everyone in our community about it as soon as I started reading it, and I posted it on Instagram, and I was like, everybody get this right now. okay, you've got a billboard. You're allowed to put one thing on it. It's the biggest mistake that most musicians are making practicing. What is the first thing that you're telling them to stop doing this?
I think what I would put on a billboard is take breaks. I think
Yeah.
I think that would be the thing. Like, because I think we think that it's not practicing if you're not constantly making sound, right? That a practice session should be like making sound the whole time. And in my class at NEC, students often talk about, yeah, like I can remember when I was a kid and I would try to take a break and my mom would be like, I don't hear any music up there, right?
Exactly.
Right? And that I'm like, no, like that's so damaging. Like breaks are
I love my mom, but she said that.
Right, breaks are the most important. And so yeah, if I could put something on a billboard, it would say take breaks.
And that was when before I had a phone too, so
Yeah.
I probably just was sitting there like
Right,
spacing
and
out.
it was good. Like your brain was processing during that. I mean, the other thing too, which we haven't talked about, is mental practice. Like the importance of doing things, rehearsing things in your mind, making sure you can feel things and hear things. I do a lot of that in my practicing too. I said about 10 minutes of my practice time is micro breaks. Probably another 10 minutes is mental practice. So a minority of the time in my practice session is there actual sound coming out of my viola. That's really different than how I used to practice. It used to be sound the whole time.
Yeah.
But
absolutely
not anymore, because it works a lot better to take breaks and mental practice.
I know for memory for myself, right before I sleep, I try to go through pieces.
That's a great thing to do. Yeah. To rehearse in your mind, like, okay, can I hear what it's supposed to sound like in my mind? And can I feel myself playing it on the instrument in my mind? And if I call them black holes, if there's any black holes, places that either I'm totally blank and I'm like, I don't know how it goes right there, or it's like kind of fuzzy and I can't really tell, is that an F sharp or an F natural? I don't actually know. Like, I want to identify those black holes so that I can plug them up or make them into stars. I don't know, the analogy breaks down, but I want to find those black holes so that I know what's supposed to be there and I can feel it and hear it, so that the black hole doesn't show up in a performance, right? Because we've all had that experience of like coming up to something and be like, oh my God, I have no idea what comes next. Like, that's the worst feeling ever. But if you can discover those black holes beforehand and make them not black holes, then that's not going to happen to you in performance.
Make them stars.
Make them stars. Yeah, there you go.
Is there anything in the research about working with recordings or score study?
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of the research I talk about was not actually done on musicians. It was done on athletes or everyday people or surgeons or whatever, like applying it to music. But listening to recordings is really important. And I think a lot of times, especially at the conservatory level, students are discouraged from listening to recordings of their pieces. But my reaction to that, I've never understood that, because listening or like modeling great artists is such an
emulating.
Yeah, it's such like I have to drive by the Museum of Fine Arts when I go to NEC to teach. Always there are students sitting outside at this time of year, like sketching the sculptures that are outside. If you go to any art museum in the world, and at any time, there are always art students there, right? With their sketchbooks. Absolutely. And they're making copies of the great artwork. And so for us as musicians, I think we need to listen to the possibilities that exist, right? Like listening to a bunch of recordings, not to necessarily copy them, but to get ideas, to hear, oh, I really like that, or I don't like that interpretation. Like, it's okay to say that you don't like a great artist's interpretation. They are not God. You could disagree. Like, even if they were God, you can still disagree. And just getting ideas for yourself, because if you don't have any ideas in your head, if you don't have any models to sort of draw from, you're limited to your own experience, and our own experience is by definition limited because it's just yours. It's just one person's experience. But when you listen, you hear what's possible, and then you have much more to draw from. So that is critically important, as is score study. Like we were talking before, like getting an overview of the piece. Brains really don't like information that feels like it exists in a vacuum, that it feels just like random pieces of information. Brains do a lot better when you can take information and put it into some kind of larger structure, or under some kind of larger umbrella, or understand it in a deeper, more multifaceted way. And when you do score study and you really understand like how the piece is put together, or you make connections between, oh, whoa, like those are the same notes here and here, but they're like totally mixed around here, but it is
like pattern recognition.
Yeah, like you just understand music so much more deeply when you actually like take a minute to look at the score, and you're not thinking about how do I play this physically, but like what was the composer doing. Then it makes it easier to learn. It makes it a lot easier to memorize, because you understand it much more deeply. So yeah, those listening and score study, I think, are such important things for us to do as musicians.
So these count as practicing, those two things?
They count as practicing. Yes. Woo. Yeah. They absolutely. Yeah. We think practicing is making noise on the instrument, and that's like just a tiny part of it.
Well, speaking of multitasking, I'm currently on like this health kick to hit 15,000 steps a day. So on the treadmill, I've got my iPad with the 2 pages at once, and I'm going through the score and like trying to get the overview, and I'm getting my steps in. So you've got your laundry, I've got my steps.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, speaking of possibilities, what is the next step for you? I mean, you've got all of these incredible hungry musicians. I mean, everything you're saying is so obvious and helpful, but we've been learning backwards. So how do we keep spreading this message and reach more people?
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's the great question. I mean, I always have like a million different projects, like, going in my head.
I believe you.
Yeah. I mean, I would say one project that I've wanted to do for a number of years, but it's very time intensive, so I need time to do it, is I want to learn an instrument from scratch and document that whole process for.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Right? Because I get contacted by so many adult beginners who understandably aren't quite sure how to apply all this stuff to what they're doing, or think it doesn't apply when you're a beginner. And I want to document that process as someone who knows how to practice, but maybe doesn't know anything about playing whatever instrument I choose. Because
what are you going to choose?
I'm probably going to choose guitar, actually, because there's such a huge adult amateur community of guitarists. That's a very popular instrument that people pick up later in life. And also, it's not very expensive, and it's not very big. The other one I would pick is piano, but pianos are expensive, and I don't have room for piano in a piano where I live. But yeah, I would love to do that, because I think, one, it would be super interesting for me to learn an instrument from scratch again. But to document that process, I also think would be super, super interesting.
We need like a film crew following you around. We can make a YouTube channel. Like,
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one thing, kind of cooking. And then another thing, I get lots and lots of questions about neurodivergent learners, specifically autistic and ADHDers. And that is something I say in the book that I'm not commenting on that because I don't really have that expertise. But since I wrote the book, I have learned a heck of a lot about those things. And I can talk much more knowledgeably about it. So that's sort of another big project for me coming up, is creating resources around that, both for neurodivergent students, but also for teachers helping their neurodivergent students. Because all of this stuff does absolutely apply. That's usually the question I get. Like, does this apply to my ADHD students or my autistic students? And the answer is yes. It's just the specific application might look different.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And anything around like a practice lab? I mean, when you said that you had your students come in and try with the timers, I can imagine like I would sign up for that in a heartbeat.
In a second. Yeah. I mean, I teach online classes. Actually, my online class just started again last Sunday. And as part of my online classes, we do exactly that we have time in the class to try out different practice methods. Everybody, I mean, we're on Zoom, right? Everybody in their own practice room, and then be able to talk about it. But yeah, having some kind of like regular practice lab would be really fun. Over this past summer, I taught a 5-week class online about starting new repertoire, because that's something I get a lot of questions about. And most of my online classes are very sort of science heavy, I would say. I like do a presentation where I present the science, then we try out practice things and talk about it. The class over the summer was more like, okay, how do you start something new? There was 20 minutes in each class where we all, including me, practiced, and I videoed my practice for people to sort of watch later. And that was much more sort of practical, hands-on. All of us, I learned something from scratch for that, all of us going through the process of, what does this look like? How do you handle the challenges that come up when something is new? What does it look like to start something new and sort of work through that process over 5 weeks? So that was, I'll probably teach that class again, because it was really fun, and helpful, I think.
Amazing. I mean, this has been just packed full of information. I want to encourage everybody, run out and get your copy on Amazon, Learn Faster, Perform Better.
Yes.
And yeah, Molly, if you had an action point for everyone listening right now, what would you tell them to go do?
I would tell
Besides buy the book.
Besides buy the book. The action point I would say is to take 3 micro breaks today during your practicing. More is better, but 3 is a good place to start. See if you can take a 10-second break during your practice today at 3 points as a way to get started with that.
Okay, we're going to know what the neighbors are up to. Our laundry's done. We are on top of our repertoire.
Exactly.
We've got overviews. We've got it all together. Molly, thank you. This has been incredible. I really appreciate you coming on. You also have a great newsletter people can sign up for through your Instagram. What is your Instagram handle?
Yeah, my Instagram is just my name, I think. Yeah, just Molly Gebrian. Or through my website. There's a link on my website to sign up
Molly
for
Gebrian.
my
Perfect. And you can also DM us, The Fearless Artist, and we will send it. I think we're going to be giving away 3 copies of your book to everybody listening.
Exciting. Oh, thank you.
So all they have to do is leave a review of the podcast and share it on their stories, and we're going to pick 3 winners.
Cool.
And
that's
we
exciting.
just want to keep spreading this message because it's so important and fun. So
thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll see everybody on the next episode. Remember, be fearless. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.